U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein is in Israel, where he briefed Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer on the Lebanese response to ceasefire proposals raised yesterday in Lebanon. Later tonight, the Security Cabinet is due to convene for a briefing on developments. We have more from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
U.S. Envoy Amos Hochstein spent the day in Israel meeting Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer and other officials as they review the Lebanese response to the draft ceasefire proposal presented by Hochstein yesterday in Beirut. Before leaving Beirut, Hochstein sounded upbeat.
I just concluded another meeting with Speaker Berry. The meeting today built on the meeting yesterday and made additional progress. So I will travel from here in a couple hours to Israel to try to bring this to a close if we can.
Sources say that 90 to 95% of the issues have been agreed to by the sides, but hurdles remain. The new Hezbollah leader, Naim Qassem, confirmed that Hezbollah has submitted its response to the U.S. draft ceasefire proposal. Hezbollah did not expressly say it agreed to the deal, but rather that it hinges on Israel halting its aggression and respecting Lebanese sovereignty.
هل نتوقع أن تنتج هذه المفاوضات وقفاً لإطلاق النار ووقفاً للعدوان بشكل سريع؟ لا أحد يستطيع أن يضمن، لأن الموضوع مرتبط بالرد الإسرائيلي وبالجدية التي تكون عند نتنياهو.
The war in Lebanon did not pause with the arrival of Hochstein. IDF troops continue to advance further into Hezbollah positions as far as 6 kilometers from the Israeli border. The Air Force continues pounding Hezbollah. Over 100 terror targets in Lebanon, including launchers, weapons storage facilities, command centers, and military structures, were hit over the past 24 hours. The IDF announced the names of 2 soldiers killed in the latest fighting in Lebanon. Sergeant First Class Eitan Ben-Ami, 22, from Jerusalem, was a reservist in the Commando Brigade's elite Madlan unit. Sergeant Gor Kahati, 20, from Nir Banim, served in the Golani Brigade. May they be of blessed memory.
Tragedy in southern Lebanon as renowned Israeli researcher and tour guide Zev Erlich, known as Jabo, was killed in a firefight while accompanying IDF troops. ILTV's Ariel Elachiani has more.
The life of Zev Jabo Erlich, a 71-year-old historian and archaeologist, was tragically cut short yesterday in southern Lebanon. Erlich, a resident of Ofra and a major in the IDF reserves, fell in combat when 2 terrorists ambushed his group near an ancient fort. A prominent researcher of Israel's history and geography, Erlich was accompanying IDF soldiers near an archaeological site when the attack occurred. A Golani Brigade officer was critically wounded and another soldier lost his life in the same incident. Initial investigations reveal that Erlich's entry into the war zone was unauthorized. An officer reportedly brought him into Lebanon without proper clearance, a breach now under IDF investigation. The Binyamin Regional Council mourned Erlich as a man of the land of Israel, praising his lifelong dedication to preserving and teaching the country's history. Council leader Israel Gantz described him as a symbol of love and knowledge for the land, whose legacy will inspire generations. Married with grandchildren, Erlich was also a founder of Ofra's Field School and a prolific researcher. His contributions to understanding Israel's heritage remain monumental. The IDF has vowed a thorough investigation, promising accountability to prevent such tragic incidents in the future. Meanwhile, Israel grieves the loss of a beloved scholar and soldier.
Well, incoming alerts have been triggered throughout the day from rocket and UAV intrusions from Hezbollah in Lebanon. Most were shot down, but one did strike with deadly impact during a barrage of 25 rockets fired towards the coastal city of Nahariya, killing 1 Israeli civilian. The victim was identified as a 27-year-old man from Ma'alot. A UAV was also detected and tracked in the western Galilee for over 30 minutes before being shot down. Falling fragments were detected, but so far no casualties have been reported. Overnight, there were heavy barrages fired into the upper Galilee as well, and heavy damage to a residential building in Kiryat Shmona, but no injuries were reported. A major anti-terror operation was conducted in Samaria. Border police and the Shin Bet eliminated a terror cell and 4 explosives labs in raids of the Palestinian city of Jenin in Samaria. Ground forces and airstrikes were used in the operation. 9 terrorists were killed and the explosives labs were destroyed, along with dozens of bombs ready for use. 7 wanted men were arrested. Raids were also conducted in other cities, with wanted men arrested in Kabatia and in Hebron. Now, the United States has vetoed another UN Security Council resolution demanding a ceasefire in the Gaza war. The vote came after the U.S. announced it would only support a resolution explicitly calling for the immediate release of Israeli hostages. We have more from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The result of the voting is as follows: 14 votes in favour, 1 vote against, 0 abstentions. The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council.
The U.S. cast a veto after the 15-member UN Security Council voted on a draft resolution calling for an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire in Gaza with a separate demand for the hostages' release. The U.S. voted against it after refusing to condition the ceasefire on the release of the Israeli hostages, held for 412 days.
Because, as this Council has previously called for, a durable end to the war must come with the release of the hostages. These 2 urgent goals are inextricably linked. This resolution abandoned that necessity, and for that reason, the United States could not support it. Simply put, this resolution would have sent a dangerous message to Hamas. There's no need to come back to the negotiating table.
Israeli Ambassador Danny Danon accused the council members of cynicism.
Today, most of the members of this council failed. They betrayed their own principles, their responsibilities to the innocent, and their duty to uphold justice. The resolution brought before this chamber was not a path to peace. It was a roadmap to more terror, more suffering, and more bloodshed.
Well, as Israel fights on in Gaza and Lebanon, joining us now to discuss the international community pressure and the efforts for diplomacy is Professor Gerald Steinberg of NGO Monitor. Gerald, thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on. To start, in regards to this UN vote, I mean, how can we see nations like France on the Security Council, who has hostages in Gaza, voting for a ceasefire without preconditioning the release of innocents?
The same thing's true for the British, also permanent members of the Security Council. Both of them could have cast vetoes, plus the other European countries, democratic countries that are on the Council, including Norway. Yes, these are all, I think that Ambassador Danon said it very clearly, these are all hypocrites. They're all basing their decisions on politics, not on the moral principles, and it turns the entire UN process even more into a farce. So I think that this was something that will continue to reverberate. It actually is parallel to the International Criminal Court decision to issue arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant today, another form of international farce. And I think it requires what we call the international community to take a very close look at these instruments and the way in which, instead of bringing peace, instead of bringing justice, what they do is they do exactly the opposite. They reward terror. They reward Hamas and the atrocities. They reward Hezbollah, which would have done even more than Hamas did on October 7th if they had the opportunity. And of course, it rewards Iran. Those are the 3 axes, really the axis of evil that the Security Council is supporting.
I mean, unfortunately, we've kind of seen the UN turn into a factory to support dictatorships, for really lack of a better description, but I think that applies pretty well. I wanted to ask you, what impact do such votes have on the war itself? I mean, obviously, it's the Security Council, and the motion did fail. But does the UN even have any ability to actually enforce anything in the first place? I mean, look no further than what's happened in Lebanon with UNIFIL and Hezbollah. So does this even mean anything, what happens in the UN?
I think the United Nations is actually in deep trouble, especially its operations here. UNIFIL has obviously been a complete failure, a farce, and that's been very openly demonstrated recently. I think that whatever type of agreement is reached in Lebanon, it will not be the same kind of UNIFIL Band-Aid that we've had, the fake and really supportive of Hezbollah truce organization, truce supervisory organization. It was just completely a disaster. So the whole process will change. The newly appointed designate for the United States ambassador to the UN, Elaine Stefanik, is clearly going to make a big difference. The Trump administration could cut off a lot of the funding for this activity, and I think that will force some sort of sobering up in the UN. I also think that in other countries as well, there's a movement towards getting more real about the international processes that they automatically subscribe to. I think we're going to see changes in a number of Western European countries that realize that this is completely counterproductive to the goals, to their interests. Very soon you'll see the United Nations also supporting Russia and having majority votes in favor of perhaps taking off part of Ukraine and awarding it to Russia. Those sorts of things are entirely political. Their votes are bought and traded. So I think the United Nations now is in very deep trouble. And this is simply I guess I'll use the cliche, the canary in the coal mine in this case.
We are almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you really quickly. You did reference the ICC. Of course, today the news broke that they did issue arrest warrants for now former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and the Prime Minister Netanyahu over the Gaza war. What is your response to this?
The whole process, this is actually an extension of the United Nations. This is not really a legal framework. The judges are all voted upon through a political process. The prosecutor is chosen through a political process, not by any kind of legal, legitimate weighing of their capabilities and the moral principles. And so this just illustrates and highlights the farcical process. They also want to arrest Hania and other leaders, and Sinwar, the leaders of Hamas, both of whom are dead. This balance, the fake balance, the prosecutor of the ICC is now under investigation, Karim Khan, for sexual misconduct. There's a lot of series of problems. So I think this will actually hasten the demise of the experiment called the International Criminal Court. I think that the Trump administration will put an end to it, if not before. I think the United States will probably issue their own limitations, perhaps, on the movement of ICC officials as a result of this farce.
Well, hopefully there will be someone who keeps some of these international organizations a bit more in line. Thank you, Gerald Steinberg, Professor Gerald Steinberg from NGO Monitor. Well, it seems that the Islamic regime in Iran has delayed its retaliatory strike against Israel following the U.S. elections. But that doesn't mean they aren't actively pursuing other sinister activities, from skyrocketing executions of Iranian protesters to advancing their nuclear program, prompting concern from the IAEA. Let's take a look at what happened this week. This week, the IAEA board requested a report on Iranian compliance for their nuclear program. But rather than providing the report, the Islamic Republic is negotiating to cap its stock of enriched uranium at 60%, below the threshold for a nuclear weapon. The proposal was negotiated between regime President Masoud Pezeshkian with IAEA Inspector Rafael Grossi, who called the move a step in the right direction after 2 years of no progress. He also added that 4 new inspectors were being allowed to enter Iran.
I made a request for Iran to stop increasing the stockpile of 60%, and this was accepted by Iran, which took initial steps, as it is indicated in my report, which could be verified on Saturday by our inspectors.
The Islamic regime has a vested interest in avoiding such a report, as the regime's violations of the IAEA agreement covering Iran's nuclear program could lead to snapback UN sanctions. As it is, the existing agreement expires in September 2025. The regime's foreign minister also recently hinted that the proposed cap on enrichment may be withdrawn if European diplomats continue to insist on receiving the IAEA compliance report. In recent years, the regime has steadily increased its stockpile of near-weapons-grade uranium to be just days away from converting that material into a bomb, and they have repeatedly denied access to nuclear sites to IAEA inspectors. In response to Iran's continued escalation, Israel has hinted they may also be changing their nuclear doctrine in response. This week, Netanyahu announced that the IDF did indeed strike one of Iran's secret nuclear sites, despite U.S. instructions to avoid such sites. The move was conducted as the site in Parchin was undeclared as a nuclear site. The U.S. and Israel both have been consistent that they will not allow the regime to acquire nuclear weapons, but as it stands today, the regime could be just a matter of days away from a nuclear bomb. As the IAEA examines next steps, so too is a new presidential administration preparing to deal with the Islamic regime's threats. Joining us today to discuss the future of Iran's relations with the West is Camelia Entekhabifard, the editor-in-chief of The Independent Persian. Camelia, it's an honor to have you on today. Thank you for joining us. Just to start, how do you expect the Trump administration to deal with the threat from the regime in Iran? And do you think that Israel could play any role in that?
Thank you so much, dearest Emily, for hosting me and for your excellent pronunciation of my last name. I'm very optimistic of the time President Trump taking in charge of the office in Washington, D.C. We have the experiences of him being in power, and we saw that how has he dealt with the Islamic Republic at that time. I believe that President Trump is looking for a very comprehensive agreement, as he said that back to almost 8 years ago to the regime. He gave them time. He extended Iran nuclear deal for 3 times, and he waived the restriction were on Iran over some of the sanctions. And when they didn't agree to sit and talk with President Trump face to face, then he withdrew from Iran nuclear deal. That it gives me the sense President Trump is a man of a good negotiation. He is looking for the interest of the Iranian and for the interest of the United States. And I believe he would having the same path with the Islamic Republic, inviting them for the negotiations and to see what the comprehensive agreement can have. And that can be much wider than Iran nuclear deal. It can be also included the fate of the Iranians, the people who are suffering from these mullahs, and let's him come to power and see how he's going to deal. This is my expectation from the time he's coming to power. And no, I'm not seeing any role for the Israel. Your very much last part of your questions, no.
We've heard some of the Trump appointees and Trump himself state that only the people of Iran can carry out a regime change. I'm wondering, what's your take on that? Do you agree? And if so, what could be the role of the West in supporting, of course, not forcing a regime change?
I am a very realistic person, nationalist. I love my country, but at the same time, I like to examine what is the best that serves for Iran and for my people. The Western powers, perhaps the politicians, were thinking the same way. Their interest has to serve at any kind of policy they were altering with the relation with the United States, with the Middle East, with Africa, with everywhere. Today, they are very unhappy seeing President Trump win the election. We can see that. How did they react? Just 2 months left before President Trump comes to power. They are the frontier with Russia has become so chaotic. They were agreed that Ukraine can use such missiles to hit deep inside of Russia. That it can cause the war threats, the war threats all over the world. And with Iran too, you just aired a program about Mr. Grossi, and also Vienna talks over Iran has been punished over extra sanctions, and also Iran may be threatening to withdraw from letting the inspectors visiting Iran nuclear sites. Why, Emily? Ask yourself, why there has to be that this very short time before Trump comes to power, the European put such a pressure on Iran? They knew that Iran is increasing their enrichment. They are close to making nuclear bomb. They are saying it over and over and over. Why they didn't take a more serious action 2 years ago when Mahsa revolution was on and Iranians were so much willing for their support? Because they didn't serve their interest. Now this extra pressure on Iran serve their interest because they want to cut the hand of President Trump's negotiation.
Of course. And I think also when it comes to Europe, it's important to note that in the big picture, there's potential for an even greater future the day after this regime. Well, let's hope for a better policy change. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Emily.
And now it's the time for our Hebrew word of the week. Each week, along with eTeacher, we learn a new Hebrew word and relate it to the Bible, current affairs, and our everyday lives. For more info on the Rosen School of Hebrew, please scan the QR code on your screen. But in the meantime, let's hear this week's word of the week.
Welcome to Hebrew Word of the Week. I'm Ariella, and in this segment, together with eTeacher, we explore the beauty and depth of the Hebrew language. Each week, we learn a new Hebrew word or phrase and discover how it's used in the Bible, current events, and everyday life. Today's Hebrew word is eretz, which means country or land. In Hebrew, eretz is more than just a physical place. It also carries a deep emotional and spiritual connection, especially when referring to Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. Eretz is a word that resonates throughout the Hebrew Bible, symbolizing the promised land, a place of belonging and a source of national identity. It is not just land in the geographical sense, but a homeland filled with historical, cultural, and spiritual significance. In modern Hebrew, Eretz still holds this meaning, often tied to the love and connection people feel for their country, their roots, and the shared story of their nation. Whether in ancient or contemporary texts, Eretz is a powerful word that unites people with the land they call home. Here are some examples of how the word Eretz is used in a sentence. אנחנו אוהבים את הארץ שלנו. We love our country. ארץ ישראל היא הבית של העם היהודי. The land of Israel is the home of the Jewish people. If you're interested in learning more about the Hebrew language, check out eTeacher. This online and live course is the most established Hebrew language instruction institution. You can learn with a time-proven method for every level or start from scratch. eTeacher offers dynamic online courses with live video lessons, weekly webinars, and ample support, allowing you to connect to a lively global community for an enriched learning experience. Scan the QR code or click the link below and visit the eTeacher website today to learn more. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Hebrew word eretz. Please join us next week for another episode of Hebrew Word of the Week. In the meantime, I encourage you to reflect on the concept of eretz, what your own country or homeland means to you. Feel free to share your thoughts and comments with us in the comments below.
In Washington, D.C. this week, international pop star Sia and Israeli representative to the 2024 Eurovision, Edin Golan, both performed heartfelt pieces at the ADL's annual concert, this year titled The Concert Against Hate. Survivors of the Nova Music Festival were also at the event. Let's hear more about it from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Artists, producers, influencers, and industry figures all gathered in Washington, D.C. to attend the ADL's annual concert. This year, the event was attended by many Nova Music Festival survivors, each carrying harrowing stories and experiences. The survivors were serenaded by two iconic pop stars that made headlines with their appearance. Australian pop star Sia has been a steady pro-Israel voice before October 7, 2023, and remained a close ally as she uses her platform to raise awareness on anti-Semitism. And Israeli icon and 2024 Eurovision representative Edin Golan also took the stage where she sang October Rain, the song that had to be altered for the Eurovision to create Hurricane after the song had been banned by the European Broadcasting Authority. The event also saw music mogul Scooter Braun and actor-comedian Ben Stiller. Both shared a message of the danger of rising anti-Semitism, stressing the importance of unity and resilience in the face of this danger. Sagot Winery, where passion meets tradition. Nestled in the heart of Binyamin, our vineyards yield exquisite wines, crafted with generations of expertise.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly cloudy skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures reaching lows of around 13 degrees Celsius or 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, cloudy skies are expected alongside warm temperatures, reaching highs of about 25 degrees Celsius or 78 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you for watching.